Marcus Vale hadn't expected to die alone on Europa, but the blinking red emergency beacon suggested that outcome was increasingly likely. The subsurface research station had lost main power 3 days ago, and his distress signal was swallowed by the ice kilometers above him. He sat in the dying glow of his portable lamp, surrounded by specimens of the bioluminescent fungi he'd spent 2 years studying organisms that thrived in darkness. Unlike him, the fungi pulsed with gentle blue light, their rhythm almost like breathing. Marcus had named the species Lunaris europae, though he doubted anyone would ever read his research notes. His water recycler had failed that morning. He had maybe 4 days left, possibly 5 if he rationed carefully. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd traveled 500 million kilometers to study life in extreme conditions, only to become another casualty of humanity's reach exceeding its grasp. He was cataloging his final observations when the wall began to sing. At first, Marcus thought it was equipment failure, some resonance in the dying power grid, but the sound grew clearer, a harmonic vibration that seemed to bypass his ears and speak directly to his bones. The fungi responded, their bioluminescence shifting from blue to violet, pulsing in synchronization with the wall's song. Then the wall began to move, not crumbling or breaking, but flowing like water made of stone. The metal and rock rippled outward, forming a cavity, and through it stepped something that made Marcus's scientific training war with his sanity. She was tall, easily 9 feet, and appeared to be carved from living crystal. Her body refracted the fungi's light into cascading rainbows, and her form suggested femininity in the way certain geological formations suggest ancient rivers. Where her face might be, a constellation of luminous points ranged themselves into something that could have been eyes, or stars, or both. Marcus scrambled backward, knocking over sample containers. The being paused, tilting her head with a sound like wind chimes in a cathedral. When she spoke, the words formed directly in his mind, layered with harmonics he could feel in his chest. Soft one, you are far from your star. Marcus's voice cracked. He cleared his throat, scientist instinct overriding terror. I'm human. From Earth. This is a research station. The crystalline being moved closer, each step creating a soft resonance against the floor. She radiated no heat, yet Marcus felt warmth nonetheless, not physical, but something deeper, like standing in sunlight after a long winter. Human, she repeated, the word rolling through his mind like a meditation. The flesh singers. We thought you myth. Stories from the old chorus, before the great silence. We're real enough, Marcus said, watching in fascination as smaller crystalline formations like fingers, perhaps, reached out to hover near his hand. Are you alone? What are you? I am Vesha, first voice of the crystalline accord. I came seeking the song we heard through the deep your fungi sing in frequencies we have not heard in eons, but finding you. Her light pulsed brighter. You are impossible. You are made of water and carbon, so fragile, so temporary. How do you hold thoughts in such softness? Marcus found himself laughing, the sound slightly hysterical. We ask ourselves that every day. How do you hold thoughts in crystal? How are you alive? We are structure and resonance. We are the universe made aware of itself through pattern. Vesha's lights dimmed slightly, taking on a hue Marcus interpreted as curiosity. But you burn with such brief intensity. Your body generates heat, consumes and destroys to maintain itself. You are entropy made conscious. That's actually pretty accurate, Marcus admitted. He gestured around the darkened station. Though my entropy is accelerating faster than planned, my systems are failing. Vesha's harmonic shifted to something minor, almost sorrowful. You are dying. Yes, this troubles me. She moved closer still, and Marcus could see now that her body wasn't solid crystal, but countless microscopic structures, flowing in coordinated patterns, like a murmuration of starlings frozen in diamond. In the old songs, the flesh singers were our first teachers. They showed us beauty in transience, meaning in mortality. We crystalline remember everything. Our thoughts echo through our structures for millions of your years. But the flesh singers taught us that some things gain power through their brevity. Marcus felt tears forming from stress, wonder, or the simple relief of not dying alone. He couldn't say, "That's a beautiful thought, but I'd still prefer to not be quite so brief." Vesha's lights rippled with something that might have been laughter. Your water is failing? Yes, and my heat, soon. This I could address. Our kind filter and purify through our matrix, and we generate quantum heat through our bonds. She extended her hand fully, and Marcus saw it was less like fingers and more like an intricate lattice of living architecture. But I must touch you. I must know, is flesh truly so soft? In all my spans, I have never encountered an organic intelligence. Marcus hesitated only a moment before reaching out. When his hand met hers, it was like touching sunlight filtered through a gemstone. Cool but not cold, solid but somehow yielding. Where they connected, her crystalline structure began to glow with his body heat, converting his thermal signature into patterns of light that danced up her arm. Thus his entire being flared brilliant gold. Impossible, she breathed. You are warm. You are so warm inside. Dante Reeves had been drifting in the escape pod for 6 weeks when the ship found him. Not a human ship. He'd known that immediately when the pod's sensors registered the approach. The vessel that swallowed his tiny craft whole was biological, its hull rippling with patterns that reminded him of neural networks or perhaps musical notation. When the airlock dilated open like an iris, Dante grabbed his portable sound deck, the only piece of equipment he'd salvaged from the wreck, and stepped into a corridor that hummed with frequencies he could feel in his teeth. The ship was singing to itself. As a sound engineer, Dante had spent his career translating emotion into audio, building soundscapes for VR experiences and meditation apps. He'd mixed concerts for crowds of thousands and crafted lullabies for sleep therapy. But nothing had prepared him for this, a symphony in 3 dimensions, where walls pulsed with rhythm and the air itself seemed to carry melody. He'd been wandering for maybe 20 minutes when she appeared, materializing from a wall as if she'd always been part of it. She was shorter than a human, perhaps 5 feet tall, and her crystalline body held colors he didn't have names for, shades that seemed to exist between the visible spectrum, like hearing a note between C and C sharp. Where the beings he'd seen at a distance appeared fully formed, she seemed younger somehow, her edges less defined, her internal structures still finding their patterns. You're the flesh singer, she said, her voice manifesting as a pure tone in his mind. Curious and bright. Mother said you would be here. She said I should learn from you, but I don't understand. How can flesh sing? You can understand me? Dante asked, surprised. Mother touched one of your kind on the ice moon. She shared the patterns with the Accord. Now we all carry your language in our resonance. The being moved closer, circling him with childlike fascination. I am Valora. You are Dante. These are just sounds you make with air and meat, but Mother says they matter to you. So they matter. Dante couldn't help but smile. Sounds with air and meat. That's going to be the title of my memoir. He held up his sound deck. This is how I sing. I capture frequencies, layer them, create emotional resonance. Show me. He powered up the deck, grateful that its solar cells had kept charging in the pod. His fingers moved across the interface, pulling up a piece he'd been composing before the accident, something meant for a documentary about Earth's oceans. The sound that emerged was waves on a shore, wind through kelp forests, the deep sonorous calls of whales echoing through the abyss. Valora's entire body lit up like a supernova. Her colors shifted rapidly, azure to amber to a deep crimson that pulsed in time with the whale song. The walls around them responded, the ship's own humming adjusting to harmonize with Dante's composition. He watched in amazement as the corridor transformed into a visual representation of his music, light and structure dancing in perfect synchronization. This is morning, Valora said softly, and love, and distance. How do you hold so much in simple vibration? It's not simple, Dante replied, stopping the playback. His chest felt tight. That piece was for my partner. She was on the ship when it broke apart. I don't know if she made it to a pod. Valora's lights dimmed to a gentle blue. Your song carries her echo. You build structures of sound to hold what you cannot hold in flesh. This is why you are singers. You create external memory, because your internal memory fades. I guess that's true. Dante sat down against the living wall, which adjusted its texture to support him more comfortably. We forget. We lose things. So we make art, we record, we sing our stories so they'll outlive us. We never forget, Valora said, settling beside him in a pose that mimicked his own. Every thought I have ever had lives in my matrix forever. Every conversation, every sensation. Mother has memories from before your star formed. But she says this makes us lonely in a way flesh singers are not. You forget pain. You can become new. Dante looked at his hands, thinking about the scars he'd accumulated, burns from faulty equipment, calluses from guitar strings, the crooked finger he'd broken as a child. Each one told a story, but the pain was long gone. Maybe that's our gift, the ability to heal and move forward. Teach me, Valora said suddenly. Teach me to create something that will fade. I want to understand temporariness. For the next several hours, Dante worked with Valora, showing her how to manipulate sound waves, how to build crescendos and resolve tension, how to make silence as powerful as noise. She learned with incredible speed, her crystalline mind processing concepts that took human students years to master. But more than technique, she absorbed the philosophy that music's power came from its transience, that a song was beautiful because it ended. Together, they created something new. Dante provided the emotional framework, the human understanding of longing and hope and bittersweet joy. Valora added harmonic dimensions impossible for human ears, frequencies that could only be felt, perceived by the body rather than the mind. The ship itself joined in, its biological systems creating a bass note that resonated through every surface. When they finished, the composition hung in the air for exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds, then dissolved into silence. Valora sat very still, her lights barely visible. It's gone, she whispered. Yes, we made something beautiful, and now it exists only in memory. Your memory, which will fade. My memory, which will not. Her colors began to shift again, moving through a spectrum that Dante realized was emotion made visible. I understand now. This is why Mother was so moved by the flesh singer she found. You are not fragile despite your temporariness. You are powerful because of it. Every moment you exist is an act of defiance against entropy. Dante felt something warm roll down his cheek. He touched the tear, then held his finger up to show Valora. We even leak salt water when we feel too much. Completely inefficient, she reached out, her crystalline structure approaching the tear with reverence. When she touched it, the water spread across her matrix in dendritic patterns, and Dante heard a sound like wind chimes sighing. Beautiful, Valora said. You are so beautiful in your fragility. So are you, Dante replied. In your permanence. The ship hummed around them, carrying them both deeper into space, while in the corridor, two impossible beings sat together in comfortable silence, learning that the space between flesh and crystal was not as vast as either had believed. Somewhere in the mathematics of sound and light, they had found a common language, and in finding it, they had both become something neither had been before. Leona Ashford had designed habitats for Mars, underwater cities for Earth's drowning coastlines, and orbital farms that fed millions. But standing in the greenhouse bay of the hybrid station, watching her carefully engineered soil systems fail for the third time in as many weeks, she felt like a first-year student again, out of her depth and grasping at solutions that dissolved like morning frost. The pH is wrong again, she muttered, checking her readings. No, wait, the pH is perfect. It's something else, something I can't measure. You are trying to grow songs in silence, a voice said behind her. Resonant and deep, like a cello made of stone. Leona spun around. The crystalline being stood in the doorway, tall enough that his uppermost structures nearly brushed the ceiling. Unlike Thesha, whose form she'd seen in the broadcasts, or the younger Valora who'd visited last month, this being appeared distinctly masculine, broader through the shoulders. His crystal lattice arranged in dense, protective patterns. His coloring was earth-toned, amber and umber, and the deep green of jade, with veins of gold running through his structure like rivers on a map. You must be Orovex, Leona said, wiping soil from her hands. Thesha said you were the one who convinced your people to attempt this station. I am. He moved into the greenhouse with surprising grace, his form creating soft harmonic tones against the floor. And you are the architect who designed this space, the one who believes our peoples can share worlds. I'm the one who's failing to prove it, Leona admitted, gesturing at the rows of struggling plants. Earth crops won't grow properly. They sprout, they develop, then they just stop. They don't die, but they don't thrive. I've adjusted every variable I can think of. Orvex approached the nearest planter, extending what Leona had learned to think of as a hand, an intricate branching of crystalline structures that could separate and recombine at will. He held it above the soil, not touching, and the plants below began to glow faintly. "Your variables are correct," he said, "but you are missing the constant. Plants are not merely chemistry. They are living songs, and this station does not sing in frequencies they recognize." Leona blinked. "You're saying the station's vibration is wrong? Everything vibrates. Your flesh vibrates. These plants vibrate. My people and I vibrate. This station was built by both our kinds, designed to harmonize our frequencies. But we tuned it for ourselves for a crystalline and flesh singer cognition. We did not consider that your non-sentient life might need different harmonies." He knelt a strange, flowing motion and placed his hand directly into the soil. Leona's instruments immediately began registering changes, but not in pH or nutrient content. The seismic sensors she'd installed to monitor the station's stability showed waves of frequency pulsing through the ground, gentle oscillations in ranges she hadn't thought to monitor. The plants responded immediately. Their leaves lifted, their stems straightened, and Leona watched in amazement as a tomato plant that had been stalled at 6 inches suddenly pushed out new growth, unfurling leaves with visible enthusiasm. "You're singing to them," she whispered. "I am reminding them of their home frequency. On Earth, your planet sings in what you call the Schumann resonance, approximately 7.83 cycles per breath. Here, the station hums at frequencies comfortable to crystalline consciousness. The plants are homesick." Leona sat down hard on a workbench, her mind racing. That's brilliant and obvious, and I should have thought of it." She pulled up her design interface, already modeling modifications. "If we can install frequency generators tuned to Earth's natural resonance in the organic sections, while maintaining the crystalline harmonics in your areas, a duet," Orvex said, and Leona heard approval in his tone. Not one song, but to that complement each other, they worked through the station's night cycle. Leona designing and Orvex testing, his ability to perceive and generate specific frequencies making him an irreplaceable collaborator. As they worked, they talked. Leona learned that Orvex had been a cultivator of crystal gardens on the crystalline homeworld, coaxing rare formations into existence over centuries. He'd volunteered for this mission because he believed growth required risk, and his people had been stagnant for too long. "Vesha said something similar," Leona said, adjusting the parameters on a frequency generator. "That meeting humans had awakened something in your people, a curiosity about impermanence. We have existed for millions of your years, perfect and unchanging." Orvex replied. He'd learned to work with human tools, his crystalline structures interfacing directly with digital systems in ways that made Leona's engineering team weep with envy. "But perfection is a form of death. Your kind lives for mere decades, yet you contain such intensity. You love knowing you will lose. You build knowing it will crumble. This fascinates us. It's not a choice," Leona said softly. "We'd live forever if we could. Would you?" Orvex turned to face her fully, his golden veins pulsing with gentle light. "I have memories of stone forming from magma, of the first coherent thought emerging from random crystal structure. I remember everything, Leona Ashford. Every moment, every conversation, every insight. They do not fade. They do not blur. Sometimes I wonder if this is wisdom or merely accumulation." Leona met his gaze, or what she thought of as his gaze, the concentration of light points that suggested eyes. "You're lonely. We are all lonely. Your kind, isolated in your individual flesh. My kind, isolated in our eternal memory. Perhaps this is why Vesha wept with joy when she touched the first human, because in that moment, there was connection across the divide. Without thinking, Leona reached out and placed her hand against Orvex's arm. His crystal was warm not from heat, but from some internal energy that defied her understanding of thermodynamics. Where her skin made contact, his structure began to glow, soft amber light spreading in patterns that looked like capillaries or rivers or lightning. "Your heartbeat," Orvex said, wonder in his voice. "I can feel it. Such a desperate, beautiful rhythm. How can you live knowing it will stop? How can you live knowing it won't?" Leona countered. They stood that way for a long moment, human and crystalline, flesh and structure. temporary and eternal. Then Oryvex did something Leona hadn't known was possible. He shifted his form, his crystalline structure rearranging until he stood at her height, his mass redistributed to create something closer to human proportions. Better? He asked. You don't have to change for me, Leona said. I am not changing. I am adapting. There is a difference. His form rippled with what she'd learned to recognize as amusement. Besides, your neck was developing tension from looking upward. I can perceive such things in your structure. Leona laughed, surprising herself. Now you're showing off, perhaps. Is it working? Over the following weeks, they transformed the station. Frequency generators hummed with Earth's natural resonance in the greenhouse bays. Crystalline harmonics sang through the observation decks. And in the common areas, both frequencies played together, creating something new, a hybrid environment where tomatoes grew alongside crystal formations. That Oryvex coaxed into impossible geometries. But more than the station transformed, Leona found herself staying in the greenhouses long after her shifts ended. Not because the work demanded it, but because Oryvex was there. They would sit among the growing things, and she would tell him stories of Earth, of forests and oceans, and the feeling of rain. He would share memories of his homeworld, of crystal spires that sang in solar wind, of the slow, patient mathematics of growth that took millennia. One evening, as they watched Earth rise beyond the viewport, Leona said, Do you ever wish you could forget? Just for a moment? Every day, Oryvex admitted. But then I would forget this. You here, teaching tomatoes to grow in starlight. And I find I want to remember everything about it. Leona felt her heart do something complicated. That's either the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, or the most tragic. Why not both? Oryvex extended his hand, and she took it, feeling the now familiar warmth. You have taught me something, Leona Ashford. That gardens are not about permanence. They are about the daily choice to nurture, to tend, to care for something fragile. We make a strange pair, Leona said. That the best gardens always do. And in the greenhouse bay of humanity's first hybrid station, surrounded by the impossible, by plants growing in frequencies that shouldn't exist and crystals that bent themselves toward sunlight like flowers, to beings from opposite ends of biology's spectrum stood together, their hands joined, creating a future neither could have imagined alone. Julian Cross had spent 15 years chasing ghosts, the lost colony ships that had vanished during humanity's first desperate expansion into deep space. As a historian, he'd tracked down 3 of the 7 missing vessels, finding wreckage, survivors, and stories that rewrote the textbooks. But the Persephone had eluded him for his entire career, disappearing beyond the heliosphere with 2,000 souls aboard, never to be heard from again. Now, standing on the surface of the crystalline homeworld, Julian realized he'd been searching in the wrong kind of space entirely. The memory spires rose around him like a forest of frozen lightning, each one a tower of living crystal that stretched kilometers into the amber sky. They sang constantly, a chorus of countless voices layered across frequencies that made his bones ache and his eyes water. The crystalline guide who'd brought him here, a being named Seraph, had explained that the spires were their libraries, their histories, their very identity made physical. Every thought, every memory, every moment of their species' existence was encoded in the lattice. And you're saying one of your people might have memories of the Persephone? Julian asked, his voice barely audible over the harmonic symphony. Not might, Seraph corrected, her delicate structure refracting the planet's red sun into ruby brilliance. Myrinth was there. He remembers, but that was 82 years ago. He's still alive. We do not die as you do, Julian Cross. Myrinth has existed for 6 million of your years. He was ancient when your species discovered fire. Come, he has agreed to share his memories, though he rarely speaks to anyone anymore. You interest him. They walked through the spire forest, and Julian felt the weight of ages pressing down on him. His specialty was human history, a mere few thousand years of recorded civilization. These beings measured time in geological epochs. What could he possibly say to something that old? The central spire was larger than the others, its structure so complex that looking at it made Julian's vision swim. At its base, integrated into the crystal itself, sat a being that took Julian's breath away. Where other crystalline entities he'd met appeared sharp and defined, Myronth looked almost organic, his edges softened by time, his structure filled with inclusion and fractures that somehow made him more beautiful, rather than less. His coloring was opalescent, shifting through every hue depending on the angle of light, and within his matrix, Julian could see layers upon layers of geometric patterns, each one presumably containing eons of memory. The flesh singer seeks old songs, Myronth said, his voice like glaciers grinding, ancient and inexorable. Seraph tells me you hunt for lost ones of your kind. Yes, Elder. Julian wasn't sure of the proper form of address, but respect seemed universal. The colony ship Persephone. It passed through this region in 1943 by our calendar. 2,000 people. We never found any trace. 1943. Myronth's internal light pulsed, patterns shifting deep within his structure. A breath ago. Yes, I remember. I was tending the outer gardens when I heard their engines. Such crude propulsion fusion torch, was it? I had not encountered your kind before. I was curious. Julian's hands trembled as he pulled out his recorder. You saw them. The ship was intact. For a time. They were damaged, leaking. The flesh singers inside were dying of radiation. Myronth's tone carried something that might have been sorrow. I did not understand what I was witnessing. I knew of organic life, we had encountered it before, millions of years past. But sentient organics, we thought them legend, failed experiments of the universe. What happened to them? Julian asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. I brought them here. All 2,000. I created a frequency bubble to protect them from our world's harmonics, which would have shattered their fragile bodies. I tried to communicate, but they could not perceive my thoughts. They were so frightened. Myronth's lights dimmed. I could not save most of them. The radiation had already destroyed their cellular structures. I watched them die, Julian Cross. I watched them hold each other, speak their last songs to one another. I did not understand the words, but I understood the meaning. They were saying farewell. Julian felt tears on his face. But you said most of them. Some survived. 43. I managed to purge the radiation from their systems using harmonic resonance, though I damaged some of their internal structures in the process. They lived here for 27 of your years before the last one died. I learned your language from them, learned about Earth, about music and art and the terrible, beautiful brevity of flesh. A woman named Sarah taught me what laughter was. A man named James explained poetry. Where? Julian's voice broke. Where are they now? Here, Myronth gestured toward his own body. I preserved them. Not their flesh, which deteriorated as all flesh must, but their patterns. When each died, I was present. I recorded their final neural patterns, copied the electromagnetic signatures of their dying thoughts into my matrix. They exist within me now, Julian Cross. Imperfect copies, perhaps, echoes rather than true consciousness. But I could not bear to let them fade completely. Julian sat down on the crystalline ground, overwhelmed. 15 years of searching, and here was the answer, not in wreckage or debris, but in the memory of an ancient being who had tried to save them. Can I speak with them? No, they are not conscious. They are memory only. Patterns I replay for myself when I wish to remember what it meant to host the flesh singers. Myronth's structure pulsed with complex emotion. But I can show you, if you wish. I can share the memories as I experience them. Yes, Julian whispered. Please. Myronth extended a branch of his structure, and Julian reached out with shaking hands. The moment they touched, the world dissolved. He was standing in a dome of crystal, watching through Myronth's perception as human survivors worked to create a settlement. He felt the ancient beings' confusion at their constant movement, their need for food and water and sleep. He experienced Myronth's growing wonder as he learned to communicate. As Sarah taught him English by pointing at objects and repeating words with patient persistence, the memories flowed faster. James reading poetry aloud while Myronth tried to understand why sounds arranged in rhythm could create emotion. A woman named Patricia explaining her work as a botanist, describing Earth's forests with such longing that Myronth had tried to grow crystal formations in similar patterns. A child, one of the youngest survivors, teaching Myronth a game involving hand gestures and laughter. And then, one by one, the deaths, peaceful ones mostly. The survivors had been old when they arrived. and Myronth's radiation purge had shortened their remaining years. Each death, Myronth had been present, holding them in his crystalline embrace, capturing their final thoughts like a recording angel. When Julian returned to himself, he was sobbing. Seraph had quietly departed, leaving him alone with the ancient being. They weren't lost, Julian said. They were found, in a manner of speaking. I could not send them home. By the time I understood how to create a message your people could receive, decades had passed. I assumed your kind had forgotten them. Never, Julian said fiercely. We never forget our lost ones. That's what makes us human. We remember, we search. We tell the stories until everyone knows them by heart. This I learned from them. Myronth's lights brightened slightly. They told me about death rituals, graves, monuments, ways of honoring those who have passed. I did not understand at first why marked the absence of something, but then I realized. You create external memory because your internal memory is imperfect. You build monuments so you will not forget. Julian stood, wiping his eyes. I need to tell people. The families, some are still alive, descendants of the crew. They deserve to know what happened. Yes, tell them their ancestors were brave. Tell them they taught an ancient being what it meant to be mortal, and in doing so, gave those lessons immortality. Myronth paused. Will you do something for me, Julian Cross? Anything. Return someday. Bring more stories of your kind. In my 6 million years, those 27 years with the flesh singers were the most vivid, the most alive. I wish to collect more such memories before this universe grows cold. Julian approached the ancient being, placing both hands against his crystalline structure. Through the lattice, he could feel the preserved patterns of the Persephone survivors, their memories kept safe in Myronth's eternal mind, a monument not of stone, but of light and thought. I'll come back, Julian promised, and I'll bring others. We'll share our stories with you, all of them, the sad ones and the joyful ones, the histories and the myths. If you'll preserve them, then in a way, we do become immortal. A bargain then. Your stories for my eternity. Together, perhaps we can create something neither of our kinds could achieve alone, a history that spans both the momentary and the infinite. As Julian prepared to leave the memory spires, he looked back one last time at Myronth. The ancient being had returned to his meditation, but Julian could see now that he wasn't merely sitting. He was actively maintaining the patterns within himself, keeping the memories of 2,000 humans alive through sheer force of will, refusing to let them fade into the quantum foam. It was the most profoundly human thing Julian had ever seen a non-human do, and in that moment, he understood what Thesha had felt when she first touched Marcus on Europa. The recognition that consciousness, in whatever form it took, was the universe's.